Hi, and today I was wondering, thinking ahead to the next expansion, who our guide is going to be. Our guide in this instance being the NPC who seems to, past few years, have taken through us major quest lines in the expansion. So at the moment, of course, it's Khadgar. He pops up everywhere. Occasionally he palms us off on another NPC, but then it's back to Khadgar. He's leading us through everything. In Warlords of Draenor, again, it was Khadgar. We've had him for 2 expansions in a row now. This one lent itself to the old style, or I say old style, it lasted for 2 expansions, legendary quest line, and he was very much leading the charge on that one. But with Khadgar being such a prominent NPC, and I mean really the most prominent for both Horde and Alliance, he's the main guy we keep going back to. Are they really going to do that for a 3rd expansion? I'm sort of thinking not, for a couple of reasons. The first is, as Blizzard kept telling us, Warlords of Draenor and Legion were developed in parallel. In fact, it was not always going to be Warlords of Draenor first and then Legion. It could have been the other way around, they said. They made a decision. It's widely believed they made the decision for Warlords of Draenor so that it could tie in with the Warcraft movie, but then the Warcraft movie delayed for an extra year, so that sort of scuppered that one. But they could have been either way around, so it sort of made sense to use the same basic NPC to lead us through either one. But if we do it for a 3rd expansion row, not only do they not need to, because of course the next expansion, whatever it may be called, has not been done in parallel with Legion and Warlords of Draenor, but also you start to set a bit of a precedent where newer players to the game will just think that Khadgar is our spirit guide or something like that. He's just what you have in World of Warcraft to take you through these major quest lines, which is not really the case for anyone who's played the game for much longer. So going back through history first of all, I mean in vanilla of course we didn't have any one person, it was a complete hodgepodge of quests, which I quite liked, but there was certainly no central theme to World of Warcraft at the time. TBC there was a central theme. It was very much about bringing Illidan to justice, and there wasn't really a strong guide, but you could argue that Maiev and Akama were the general guiding lights along that main quest line, with Khadgar, ironically, with his beard at the time, and Adal in support. Wrath of the Lich King, and it was Tyrion Fordring to a certain extent. He wasn't really a main guide in the sense that we have them now, he just came up now and then. Then Cataclysm, even more diverse really. You had Thrall, I suppose if you had to pick on anyone you would say Thrall, but mostly it was Thrall with his Earthen Ring cronies, and also members of the Dragonfly aspects were prominent. Now, then it came to Mists of Pandaria. This is where we had the strong guide, because it was linked very much to the legendary quest line which we all took part in, and we had our main guide in the form of Rathian. We had Chen Stormstout in terms of the leveling content, the questing content, but Rathian in terms of that end game main quest line. Then, of course, as I say, Warlords of Draenor and Legion, Khadgar in both cases, I reckon just because they were developed in parallel, and it was a late decision as to which one would get the go-ahead first anyway. So the next expansion. Now, of course, they may not continue on the theme of having a strong guide at all. They may change it completely. Because bear in mind, Warlords of Draenor had this legendary quest line. Legion, if Legion had been first, presumably that legendary questline would still have been the same. So maybe it's just the fact that it was already in and planned, so they kept it in, but maybe they have had a thought about it and they're going to do it a little bit differently. But let's say they don't. So who's it going to be? I reckon shouldn't be Khadgar. 3 expansions in a row, I've already mentioned there, just sets that precedent. But when you're thinking of one, because we now have such convergent quests with both Horde and Alliance essentially doing the same ones, it needs to be an NPC. Either we have a separate, I mean it could be a separate NPC in each case. You could argue, maybe we just have a separate Alliance NPC that gives us all the same quests as the Horde get, but a separate Horde NPC as well, in which case, okay, it could be anyone. But if it's going to be one NPC that does all this, then it has to be someone that is palatable to both Horde and Alliance. Now, I have to say Khadgar was always a bit of a stretch in my view, but you could just about buy it. Rathian was quite impartial, and he may yet make a proper return instead of just cameos. Now, although Thrall was Horde War Chief, he was always, through Warcraft 3 and the early years of Warcraft, World of Warcraft that is, a big fan of peace. You always got the impression he'd be the first person to say yes if the Horde and the Alliance came together and said, look, do you know what, we want to get on with each other. Same with Tyrion Fordring. Although Alliance, he was on friendly terms for defending an orc from human aggression, but unfortunately, he forgot to bubble hearth, so now he's dead. Jaina used to be the ideal candidate as someone who would help whichever side was interested in peace during Warcraft 3 and the initial appearances in World of Warcraft. However, now she has only hatred for the Horde, so bang goes that notion. Now here's what I was thinking. Given that the next expansion is very strongly rumoured to be an Old Gods expansion, very strongly rumoured doesn't mean to say confirmed, obviously. I was wondering if maybe Khadgar seems the most suitable. He's very involved in our affairs. It also makes a certain amount of sense because he's a dragon aspect. And if it is an Old Gods expansion, remember the Dragonflight were specifically engineered by the Titans to protect Azeroth against these foes. And it might be natural that our guide through the main storylines would be someone who has much more knowledge and experience against them than, say, the younger races. But there is another possibility, because it's not just dragons that existed to guard Azeroth. What about the Keepers? Maybe Ra-Den will make an appearance. Ra-Den, Ra as he was more properly known, was a Keeper who was lost for a very long time. And do you know what? We found him at the bottom of the Thunder King's dungeon and released him and fought him. And then when we had him beaten, he basically gave up. And he talked about the fact that there was a coming darkness to Azeroth that he didn't think we could cope with. But after beating him, he thought, oh, hang on a minute. I'm still not sure you're the people up for the job. But maybe you've certainly earned your chance to try, is what he was saying. Now, it was very vague about what that coming darkness was. We could imagine it was the Legion invasion that we are defeating right now. But what if it's not? What if this coming darkness is much more about whatever the threat will be in the next expansion, which could be an Old Gods expansion? Maybe Ra-Den will return, and maybe he will be our guide through this. I mean, the Keepers and the Dragonflight both are not faction specific. They are very obviously neutral guys in all this. They could, either one could easily be our guides through it if we're going to have one of those. But I'd be quite interested in Ra-Den coming back. And perhaps it would be interesting now he's free, that he could make a reappearance as the driver of the main narrative. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe for further content. And until next time, I'll see you later.